Hello, and welcome back to Behind the Offer, the podcast that brings real strategy, real talk, and real hiring insight to job seekers who are done playing the game the way it's always been taught. I'm your host, Samantha Sloane, ex-headhunter and founder of Hired. And today's episode is one I wish every job seeker could hear before they hit apply one more time. Because here's the truth. The people who land offers aren't always the most polished or qualified. They are the ones who build trust the fastest. Now, this episode is what I call the success formula, the invisible set of signals that separates the maybe candidates from the yes candidates. I am pulling from years of insight inside hiring, as well as walking you through the exact traits that get people hired. And I would venture to say it's probably not what you think. Here is what we're diving into. Why trust, not credentials, is what moves you forward. The 4 traits every top candidate signals, whether they know it or not. How to de-risk yourself in the eyes of a hiring manager and how to stop sounding impressive, or at least trying to. And the small shifts you can make this week to stop performing and start positioning. So whether you're stuck in ghosting limbo or preparing endlessly or wondering why the less qualified candidate keeps getting the offer, my friend, you need to hear this. This episode will be your clarity. This episode will be your recalibration, and it will be the missing puzzle piece that you have been looking for. So grab your coffee or your water, your poppy, your wine, whatever, and take me on your walk. Let's get into it. So I want to break something wide open. And here's the insight I wish every single job seeker could hear. The job does not always go to the best answer. It goes to the safest bet. The person who feels like the lowest risk yes. And that's the game, okay? That is the game. And if you don't know how to play it, you can be the most prepared, most impressive, most qualified candidate in the world, and you will still get passed over. With my clients, I always say, you could be Jeff Bezos himself and still not get hired at Amazon. And that's why today I'm unpacking what I call the trust formula. Because when I look back at every hire that I've ever advocated for as a recruiter, when I think about the ones who moved fast through rounds, the ones that hiring managers felt excited about, it really was never their resume that stood out. It was the sense of certainty that they created, and they knew how to de-risk themselves without even realizing that that's what they were doing. And once you understand this formula, your entire job search starts to feel different. You'll stop trying to prove your worth and start showing people why hiring you is the obvious move. So let me break it down. We're going to break this down piece by piece by piece. So here is the trust formula. It looks like this: clarity of value plus relevance of experience plus confidence in delivery. We need all 3 pieces, okay? Most people have just the middle piece, which is relevance of experience, but we need all 3. So let's start with the first part, which is clarity of value. Now, most job seekers I talk to do not have a skill gap. They have a clarity gap. So your resume might be full of strong experience, but if I, as a recruiter or the headhunter or the hiring manager, cannot skim it in 6 to 10 seconds and understand exactly what problem you solve, typically I'm out. And this is where 90% of resumes fall flat. They list duties versus drivers. They tell me what you did, not what happened because of it. So let me give you a real example of a client. We recently worked through this. It's super relevant probably to what you're going through. And she came to me, great experience, beautiful resume, clean format, great companies, right? All of that is good. However, every bullet point said things like managed client communications or oversaw project timelines. And so I said to her, okay, great, but that's kind of prerequisite, or what we're looking for is, what did that create? So she rewrote, and this is an example that she rewrote, led client strategy on a $1.2 million rollout, helping reduce churn by 38% within 6 months. Now, I picked this one because it's a very clear-cut example. Of course, not every bullet point, not every person, depending on your background, your experience, and the function that you do, will you be able to have, 3 metrics in one bullet point. However, what you can see is that this bullet point compared to the first clearly shows value, and it's signaling value. This tells me you're not just showing up, but you're creating outcomes. Now, when a company is hiring, whether you're talking to the recruiter or the hiring manager, they are looking to hire for outcomes. So the list of duties, the list of responsibilities, it's not actually closing the gap and getting you any closer to being hired, right? What needs to happen is you very clearly clarify your value. So a quick test that you can do for this is hand your resume to someone who doesn't know your job, right? If any of you ever watched Friends, Chandler Bing, that character, no one ever knew what he did for work, right? No one knew what he did for work. And it was an ongoing joke. They knew he went to work every day. Excuse me. They knew he had a 9 to 5, but no one knew what he did. So I want you to hand your resume. Maybe this is your spouse. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's even you doing a true objective self-audit. But I want you to review the resume and say, what would you hire me to do? Okay? Not what are the accomplishments, not what stands out, not do I look qualified. What would you hire me to do? And if they cannot answer that in 10 seconds, your clarity is off. Now, I want to be very clear. If you're doing this test and you are a machine learning engineer and you hand your resume to a non-tech person, I am not asking them to give technical jargon, okay? What we're looking for is clarity in what would you hire me to do. So, of course, let's take this test, depending on who you hand your resume to, with a grain of salt here. But this is a really, really, really important question, because what I find is job seekers are often asking the wrong questions, right? Am I qualified? Do I look impressive? Do I look like I can do the role? Does this match the job description? Where the real question, like I said, is what would you hire me to do? Now, if you do this test, which I hope that you will, whether it's with yourself or with someone else, jump in my DMs. My DMs are always open, whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be Instagram or email, and let me know what they said. Let me know, what was the disconnect? Was there a disconnect? I would love to know how this test is helpful for you, because when I give it to clients, honestly, sometimes there are really funny answers. And although it's funny in the short term, it's not so funny when we realize, hey, there's very little clarity here. So let's jump into pillar number 2 in this equation, the trust equation. So I'm going to go over that really quick again. The trust formula is clarity of value plus relevance of experience plus confidence in delivery. So pillar number 2 is relevance of experience. Now, here's what most job seekers miss. I want you to know you're not being ignored because you're irrelevant. You're being ignored because your relevance is not obvious. I'm going to say that again. Here is what most job seekers miss. You are not being ignored because you're irrelevant. You are being ignored because your relevance is not obvious. Now, hiring managers are not detectives. They are busy, they are skimming, and they are biased towards fast clarity. We can debate the hiring process all day long, but as it stands today, this is the hiring process. So it's better for you to know these things and act on it versus not. So if you're pivoting, or if you have a non-linear background, or if you're changing industries, you have to connect the dots for them. So inside hiring discussions that I've had, countless times, more times than I'd probably have liked to, I have watched incredible candidates get passed over because the hiring manager would say, I just don't see the fit. Now, I want to be very clear with you. It's not because the fit wasn't there. it's because the translation wasn't happening. Your job as the candidate is to say, you're hiring for X. Let me show you how I've already solved X, even if it looked like Y at the time. So let me give you a real life example of this. I had a client who was moving from nonprofit to tech. Now, if you know anything about nonprofit and you know anything about tech, whether you know both or even one, it's a big transition. It's a big transition. The way that companies are structured are different. The functionality is different. It's just a huge change. And so instead of trying to dim down the nonprofit experience or hide it, we reframed her intro to speak to the needs of the tech industry, right? And so what we built for her, and of course I've had permission to share this, and maybe you've seen her already on my socials, but is, is I've built scrappy solutions with no budget. So I move fast, I solve creatively, and I understand how to scale from zero. That's why I'm looking at mission-driven startups. Had she not had that line, that one-liner, of course, we did a lot more work than a one-liner, but that's what I'm sharing with you today. It would be very, very hard, and I think anyone in the nonprofit or tech space would agree with me on this. It would be extremely challenging to go from nonprofit to tech for all the reasons I listed earlier. So this was a huge shift in her framing, which if you listen to the podcast, if you're a client of mine, you know I talk about framing a lot. And it worked. She ended up getting 3 interviews that ultimately one led to a role that she has since accepted. So relevance is not always about the industry. It's about proximity to the problem. I'm going to say that again. I want you to write it down, put it on a Post-it, write it on your Starbucks cup, whatever you need to do. Relevance isn't always about industry. It's about proximity to the problem. Okay, so we're going to move on to number 3, the third part of the equation. Excuse me, I am still getting over that cold from last week. So again, the trust equation is clarity of value, relevance of experience, and confidence in delivery. So we've done pillar 1 and pillar 2. We're going to dive into pillar 3, which is confidence in delivery. So here's the belief shift I want to share with you. A lot of hiring managers do not trust someone who is overly polished and memorized. They really are looking for someone who's grounded. Because remember, when you are hiring someone, whether you've been involved in hiring decisions, or maybe you haven't, and you just want to put yourself in that frame of mind for a second, you're not hiring someone based off memorized answers. You're hiring based off what they can do for you, how they think, how they pivot, how they formulate things. You're really hiring their brain, right? That is what you're bringing on board. Because whenever you come into a new role, you'll have successes, you'll have failures, you'll have gaps, you'll need to ask for help, you'll need to help someone. It's an evolving relationship. And so if you've been told, nail your star stories, practice your star stories, practice your XYZ stories, always send a thank you note, sound enthusiastic, but not too much. You have been trained to perform. Now, this is something that when I first shifted into the headhunting role, really blew my mind. Excuse me, guys. Really, really blew my mind because I didn't realize that I was in fact trained to perform. And interviews are not auditions. Top candidates are not sounding like they're trying to pass. They sound like they've already been inside the problem with you. And as a former recruiter, I've seen this over and over and over. The person who walked in with a few clear value signals, not the script, not the perfect answer, but just here's how I think about this challenge. And here's what I've done in a similar space. That is the person who advances. Now, a red flag that I've noticed time and time again is over-explaining, memorization, tacking on phrases like, does that make sense? At the end, and trying to basically guess and perform for what a hiring manager wants to hear. That is not confidence, okay? That is self-protection. And I understand why you're in a state of self-protection. So please know that. I completely understand why, but I do want to differentiate the two for you. And so if you are performing and you are in a state of self-protection, but the hiring manager is looking for confidence and your thought process and your approach to things, you're now having two completely different conversations, even though you may be on the same Zoom or in the same room. Hence, you're not moving forward at that point. And you might not realize it, but recruiters and hiring managers can feel that self-protection. And so what is the fix? Well, in the short term, the fix looks like getting clear on your top 3 hiring signals. In other words, the patterns of value that you bring. I don't want to hear 15 years experience. I don't want to hear hard worker. I don't want to hear motivated. I want to hear the patterns of value that you bring. So from there, I want you to practice delivering those in plain language. Okay, we don't need a ton of jargon. We don't need a ton of self-descriptors, motivated, dedicated, enthusiastic. We just need plain, clear, succinct language. And then the third component is that I want you to get in a mental state where you stop trying to pass and start trying to connect. Now, I actually have a bonus pillar 4. Now, this one's subtle, but it changes everything. And this is the consistency of your message. So, quick recap. The trust formula is clarity of value, relevance of experience, and confidence in delivery. Now, I have unpacked all 3 of those pillars. So what I'm about to share now is a bonus pillar, and it is optional, by the way. And this is your consistency of message. Like I mentioned, it's subtle, but it makes a huge difference. So if your LinkedIn says one thing, your resume says another, your interview sounds like a third version, you are not building trust. You are creating cognitive dissonance. Hiring managers, because they're so short on time, are wired for pattern recognition. So all of your assets, from the resume all the way to the negotiation and everything in between, need to reinforce a single story. This is who I am. This is what I solve. And this is the version of me that you're hiring. That alignment makes you feel real. It makes you feel like a person who knows themselves and knows what they can bring to a company. And that is the foundation of trust. So to recap, the trust formula is clarity of value plus relevance of experience plus confidence in delivery. And if we want to bring in the optional 4th, we'll do plus consistency of message equals trust. These are not tactics. This is not reformulate that bullet point for the 100th time. These are trust signals. These are core communication principles. And this is what I teach to clients, how to apply them. And when you learn how to send these trust signals, you will stop getting ghosted. You will start getting real traction and momentum. Full stop. So let's talk about how to actually apply them. I want to take this from concept to clarity. If you're listening and thinking, all right, I hear you, but where the hell do I start? Let me make this easy. Step 1 is I want you to run the trust test on your materials. I want you to look at your resume. I want you to look at your LinkedIn. I want you to look at how you introduce yourself in interviews. And ask yourself, does this build trust, or am I trying to sound impressive? Don't judge yourself. There's zero judgment. There's zero shame, but we do have to be honest, because otherwise we can't fix it if we're not honest about where there's a disconnect. Because when you're trying to dazzle, you tend to overtalk. All of us. When we try to dazzle, we overtalk. But when you're focused on trust and you're grounded in your message, You clarify. So here's a quick check. 3 questions to ask yourself in addition to the question of, does this build trust or is it trying to sound impressive? Number 1, would a hiring manager instantly understand what problem you solve? Number 2, are you speaking in results or are you speaking in responsibilities? And number 3, would they say, that is exactly what we need, or looks like everyone else? Okay. This is your first pivot. Your first pivot is understanding, well, where is the gap and what does the gap look like? That's how we can close the gap, right? So step 2 here is going to be, I want you to choose your one-liner. So I shared a one-liner that I worked with on a client, that I worked with a client on, hello. And I want you to have one as well. And so every standout candidate has one clear through line from all their assets, all the interviews. It's a through line. This is not a title. This is not a paragraph. This is a sentence. It is a sentence. Okay? It's going to look like, here's the kind of problem I solve and the kind of team I do it for. Here's the kind of problem I solve and the kind of team I do it for. So I'm going to share some quick examples from different levels of clients in different industries. So all the way from entry level to C-suite. I have 3 examples to share. Number 1, I build onboarding systems that cut churn by 30% for B2B sales teams. Number 2, I turn complex data into stories that drive $10 million decisions. Number 3, I help mission-driven organizations scale without losing what makes them human. Now, these are real examples, and I want you to craft yours. Build it, craft it, practice it. Let that be your through line, and let that be the anchor of every application, which of course is your starting point. Now, step 3 here, after you've created your through line statement, is instead of rehearsing 50 answers, we have STAR, we have Google's XYZ, we have all these other acronyms, that truth be told, I've worked with them, with clients I have, but I don't love them. And unless a client is really, really bought in on it and really wants to use it and it helps them, I actually don't even teach it. So again, your step 3 here is, instead of rehearsing, all these hyper polished answers, I want you to prep 3 impact moments that can ultimately adapt across any question. Okay, so here's how, and you may want to write this down. We want to know, what was the problem? We want to know, what did you actually do? We want to know what changed because of it, and we want to know, what skill does that story prove? And what will happen is you will actually build an adaptable answer bank so that you don't need to memorize. You're just internalizing your value. And so step 4, and this is the final step, is a weekly reset. So if you're listening to this when it came out on Wednesday, fantastic. But honestly, no matter what day it is, I want you to write down, where am I putting 80% of the effort and seeing 20% of the return? And typically that is where the misdiagnosis lives. Because again, if we don't identify what the gap is just going to be this big elephant in the room holding you back, and we're never going to actually close the gap and close it for good. We need to know what it is that we're working on. So I want you to pause, I want you to refocus, and I want you to stop optimizing the wrong thing. Most job search advice is do more, here's a checklist, here's another checklist, go redo your resume, here's a new template. I'm the opposite. When I work with clients, I strip down what they're doing, try to eliminate what's not serving them, double down on what is serving them, and close the gaps. Okay? Now, here's my challenge to you. I want you to try this for 7 days. right? Give me a week of implementing what I have taught you in this podcast. A theme that I see across most, if not all, job seekers is that there is such a bombardment of information and additional work, right? New template, new strategy, try this, test this, do this, optimize this, that it doesn't give you as a job seeker, like I said earlier, time to, number one, identify, do I even need that? What is wrong? What is my gap? But it also doesn't give you time to actually integrate the info that you're working on, right? I want you to imagine if every day you got a new workout. Try yoga, try Pilates, try running, try weightlifting. You would be spinning your wheels. Your body would be sore. You'd probably pull them. I know I would pull a muscle. Okay. So my challenge to you, and what I did in the last podcast and in the last episode, and I'm doing in this episode, is I want to challenge you to integrate the information that I gave you for at least a week and then come back to me. Let me know how well it worked. Let me know the difference that it's showing in your job search. Because I promise you, if you do follow this to a T, and if you do allow yourself the time to actually integrate it, you will see a difference. And so for the next week, before you apply to anything or tweak your resume again, I want you to ask yourself, what am I being seen as? Because visibility without clarity means nothing. It means nothing. And that clarity is how you become the safe bet. Now, if this episode made something click, good. That is the whole point of Behind the Offer. This show is not about more noise or more tips or more templates or more BS. It's about rewriting the way you approach your job search so that you stop feeling like a candidate and you start showing up as the answer that I know that you are. You're not here to impress. And listen, friend, you're impressive enough. Believe me, I talk to you every day. I talk to people on LinkedIn, on email, on social, and then I talk to my clients every day. And this job market is filled with some of the most ambitious, talented, driven individuals. So you don't need to impress anybody. All I want you to do is de-risk yourself. De-risk that hiring manager saying yes. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. Trust gets you hired. Clarity builds momentum. Your job search should feel like a strategy, not a guessing game. Now, if you're ready to take this deeper, I'm here for you. My LinkedIn email is open. My DMs are open. My email is open. I am here to help you diagnose and solve. Now, before you go, I have one quick challenge. I want you to send this episode to one person who feels like they're spinning, someone who you know would benefit from this advice, someone who's smart, someone who's qualified, but someone who's also probably really exhausted. And let them know, hey friend, you're not crazy. Listen to this episode. It's less than an hour. You've just been handed the wrong formula. Now, I will be back next week with another great podcast. And until then, be sharp, be trusted, and stay one step ahead of the offer. You got this. See you next week.